And Josh made some pretty astute observations about Kohberger, and Josh is kind enough to join me now. Wow. First of all, I can't thank you enough for this interview, because I, along with so many others, have been trying to get inside the head of Bryan Kohberger, and it seems like a fool's errand. It seems impossible. So anyone who may have known him or anything about him is like a gold mine. Josh, first and foremost, what was he like? What was the Bryan Kohberger you knew like?
Yeah, so let me clear something up real quick. I don't remember a single class we had together except biology. What I said was that we had, as a collective group of students, took these classes not together. I only remember biology courses. However, as a student, he was very astute, very diligent, and he was a pleasure to work with.
So when you say he was a pleasure to work with, was he a pleasure to work with because you're a man? Because all of the reports say if you were female, he wanted nothing to do with you.
Yeah, I could say that would be accurate, just because during class and roaming around DeSales University, I never saw him really talk to anybody. In the group project, he communicated with me via text and email, and we worked diligently on this project. Him and I together with two others who really didn't do much in the project. But when it was time to communicate, he was easy to communicate and text and email and make sure the project and the portions that needed to be done were done. But in terms of his interactions with other students, the most telling thing I can say is he really kept to himself. I remember vividly many times watching him in the Starbucks in one of the buildings, and he would sit there with his computer and his headphones in and keep to himself almost all the time. In class, he would answer questions from the professor, but you never really saw him engage or interact with really anybody. Even myself in our group, we didn't have many conversations because he would shut down any kind of small talk.
So, Josh, you know, you can remember somebody for no particular reason, and you can remember someone because of something like this, and suddenly you look at your memories through a different prism. When you look back at the man you see on your screen right now, when you look back at your time with him, do you see any red flags? Do you see anything that now stands out, now makes perfect sense?
No, I can't say that I do. I mean, he was like a chameleon. I mean, for everything that's came out, some of the most heinous people look the most normal. And I'm not saying Bryan Kohberger looks normal whatsoever, but he definitely, in my aspect, doesn't raise any red flags up until this point and the past few years. But I did notice, you know, telling things that, like how you kind of said, this prism that I'm looking through in my past, and he really kept to himself. Something interesting, he always wore long sleeves, no matter if it was hot or not. And I just remember making that distinction because that was something odd that I noticed about someone, although it bears no weight and no meaning, and that he kept to himself almost all the time. And he was a commuter student, so he didn't spend much time on campus. He came to class and he left.
If you look back now, do you recognize anything in the patterns of the killings that he has now confessed to? Even though I understand, Josh, we don't have all the details, we have a fairly good idea of what he did to carry out these heinous acts. But do you recognize anything in the patterns of what he did at 1122 King Road as compared to the things that you all were being taught, the things you were learning about other terrible killers?
Yeah, you kind of mentioned it earlier with Elliot Rodger, and something I'd said in a prior interview with God knows who was that in these classes, we go over many times how in the digital age, these people will try to relive that fantasy. Digital age, physical age, doesn't matter, but they're oftentimes going to go back to that crime scene. And one way to go back to the crime scene is to go into a pseudonym like Papa Rogers and enter a community and relive that high. That is something we went over in depth. And kind of, if it does come out ever that he is Papa Rogers, would say that's pretty shocking just because that's very silly to involve yourself back into the crime and leave a digital footprint instead of, you know, being physically there. But we also know that he had went back in that morning, so he might have done both. Do
you think, Josh, that Bryan Kohberger is Papa Rodger, who showed up in those crime discussion groups after the murders?
Until someone else stands up and says that it was them, absolutely. I don't see any reason to say that it wasn't him. The pseudonym Papa Rodgers in connection with Elliot Rodgers makes a lot of sense, especially if he did idolize him as, the king of the incel community and wanted to do it, even better, or pay homage to his name and what he had done in the past. And I haven't seen anything online or anywhere that says that he isn't, or definitively that he is. So it's all speculative, of course, right now, but it would not surprise me in the slightest if, to relive that high, he entered that community just to feel everything that he felt that night again.
Pretty uncanny, the profile picture and the icon picture in the Papa Rodger. Right? I mean, when I first saw it, I thought, well, that's a dead ringer right there, and what a stupid mistake. But then again, Bryan Kohberger made a lot of stupid mistakes if he thought he was so smart at committing the perfect crime. One last quick question for you, Josh. As a student of criminology, do you think you'll ever reach out to Bryan Kohberger to try to ask him questions or learn more about why he did what he did?
Would I?
Yeah.
No, that's not my place. I mean, you leave that to Dr. Ramsland and the professionals. I run a swim school now. I have nothing to do with criminal justice anymore. I'm very happy where I'm at. Although if given the opportunity to speak to him and just ask him why, I think anybody would take that opportunity. So I guess I would say yes on that. And there better be other people in the room because, I feel for the victims and their families, and what he did, what he admitted to, now that we can finally say, is atrocious and awful. And yeah, everybody wants to ask him why, so I can't deny that I would ask him if given the opportunity, but we'll leave that to the professionals.
I said it was one last question. I lied. I have one more, and I'm sorry. I'm going to ask you anyway. Josh, he gave a plea. He confessed. There was no trial. There will be no death penalty. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I wrote a paper about the death penalty in college. I'm for the death penalty, an eye for an eye. He took 4 lives and got to keep his. I think that's the most unjust, unfair thing. And as America, we should be able to speak out about these things and make sure that people like this, get their just desserts. And he definitely is living a cushy life for the rest of his life. I'm a prior corrections officer. Jail is not that hard. You're away from your family. You have tablets. You have TVs. You have activities. You have games. You have people that literally hand you food. He is going to live the rest of his life in infamy. And I think that that's an injustice to all the victims, all their families, no matter how they personally feel, because I know some of the families felt different. I am a proponent for an eye, especially when it's 4.
Josh Ferraro, can't thank you enough for this time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.